Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar, New EU Due Diligence Law, the effects on your supply chain and how you should act, or at least, of course, some suggestions on how you can act. My name is Sam Jenks. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Kodiak Hub, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Thank you all for joining on time. The clock has struck 15:00, 3 p.m. in Central European time, so we're going to get started with today's content, and we have quite a show for today. 40 to 45 minutes of content, and we're going to get right into things. Like I said, I will be your presenter or host for today's webinar. I'm also joined in the background by my colleague, Richard Teuchler, who has been instrumental in building today's content. So thank you so much, Richard, and applause to you. Some background, of course, is that we're also going to be giving some polls during today's sessions, which Richard will be launching. So keep your voting fingers ready. And of course, as always, we're joined by our honorary host, Charlie, the office dog. So if you hear a bark in the background, it's just Charlie adding his point of view. I haven't yet gotten my mail to my apartment, so he might be rather opinionated during today's session. So I apologize in advance if that is the case. Short about Kodiak Hub, for those of you who don't know about us, Kodiak Hub is a provider of supplier relationship management technology. We provide a suite that helps procurement and sourcing professionals just like you to build smarter and more sustainable supply relationships. Our solution is an ecosystem or modular suite that our users can be able to plug and play to manage supplier information, risk, compliance, performance, and collaboration, all from one place. During the course of today's webinar, you will, of course, all become much more acquainted thoroughly with the Kodiak Hub solution and better understand how it is that our solution can be able to help you take action and remain ahead of the curve to address the new requirements of the corporate sustainability due diligence legislation that has been proposed by the EU. On to the agenda for today's webinar. During these next 40 to 45 minutes, I will try and thoroughly cover the following points. We are in the midst of the introduction. We will then jump into the next section to better understand what, in fact, this legislation that has been proposed really means for your business, how this legislation may impact your business. The following of the trends, of course, we're going to take a quick look at the German Supply Chain Act that I'm sure many of you in attendance today are familiar with, and seeing how this trend may just continue. We're going to look at, of course, what it is that you and your procurement team can do to act and how this legislation will actually be able to benefit you and your organization. Finally, we'll land in a demo of Kodiak Hub's solution to be able to show how our technology can really ease the transition into this new normal of enhanced corporate sustainability due diligence. And then finally, we'll finish with a Q&A at the end of the session. As I mentioned before, if you guys have questions during the course of the session, don't be shy. Just pop them into the chat bubble and we'll pick out some of those questions during the 3 to 5 minute session that we have blocked off at the end. On to the day's content with no further ado. Blast off. And it's important to start at the origin on the 23rd of February 2022. Earlier this year, the European Commission attempted to kickstart an entirely new era of due diligence, and it published its proposal for the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Now, this proposal is part of the EU's efforts, as we've seen during the last years, to achieve goals set out in the Paris Agreement and the recent European Green Deal. And the main elements of this due diligence directive are concerning human rights and environmental provisions. And sustainability, as we see as a mega trend, is continuing to land concretely in enhanced corporate, environmental, and social governance. And with this, of course, this legislative proposal by the EU doesn't come as much of a shocker to us, and it probably doesn't to anyone in attendance today as well. I mean, as put by the European Commission themselves, this is really a call to action. The transformation to a sustainable economy is a key political priority of the EU. It is essential for the well-being of our society and our planet. Quote, companies play a key role in creating a sustainable and fair economy and society, but they need support in the form of a clear framework. EU level legislation on corporate sustainability due diligence will advance the green transition and protect human rights in Europe and beyond, end quote. You know really what this is. Like I said, this is a call to action by the EU. They are asking for you and your companies to take responsibility and to set the new standard for sustainable business practices. The EU due diligence proposal will increase accountability for corporate leaders. By 2025, large companies will be under the effect of this proposed legislation, and by 2027, medium-sized companies in high-risk sectors will then be under this legislation, and corporate directors will have a new duty of care that will be expanded with new requirements upon their organizations. And we'll soon revisit exact definitions of large and medium-sized companies, so you know exactly which category that your company may fall into. But it's important first to reflect upon, if this proposal goes through, what will be the duty of care or the main objectives in scope? Well, some of the main objectives this EU due diligence legislation will entail are seen on screen here. And the source of this is, of course, the European Commission themselves. I mean, in a nutshell, this legislation is going to aim to enforce more responsible business practices at scale, to identify, to prevent, to mitigate different types of adverse human rights and environmental impacts in a company's own operations, in its subsidiaries, in its supply chains, and all of their value chains. I mean, the far reach of this legislation is really, really all-encompassing. And it's going to, of course, enhance the need for due diligence in various tiers, but especially supply chain due diligence, which is going to pose a great challenge to a lot of businesses globally. The question that we've been kicking around, I think that we might know the answer, but it is relevant, is why now? Well, if we see voluntary action by corporate entities, unfortunately, has really proved to be insufficient. And this is proving that there's a need for legislative action. From a 2020 study that was conducted by the EU on due diligence requirements throughout the supply chain, it was found that only 1/3 of corporate respondents from companies across various industry sectors that were in fact responding were actively working with identifying, mitigating, and following up on human rights and environmental impacts in their supply chain. Well, this is a positive sign, right? This certainly wasn't an overwhelming majority. And governance within these supply chains typically only extended to tier 1 suppliers, and the pace of initiative rollouts had proven to be far too slow and far too inconsistent that organizations were going to be able to create real impact. So the EU is pretty much stepping in, as voluntary action just isn't cutting it. So now that we have an idea, of course, of why this legislation has been proposed, what it is that has been proposed, the question that remains is, will it affect your business? Simply put, yes, probably so. The proposed EU due diligence directive makes a clear distinction between two types of companies and which it will affect. And your company may fall into one of these two groups. Group 1 being the group that will be under this legislation as of 2025 are EU incorporated limited companies that have at least 500 employees and a net turnover of $150 million. Euro worldwide. Group 2, which will be under the effect of this law by 2027, is other smaller limited liability companies operating in resource-intensive industries with over 250 employees and a net turnover of 40 million euro worldwide. And again, as the current proposal stands, Group 1 will be under effect by 2025. Group 2 will be under effect as of 2027. We're going to pause here, and I'll catch my breath and take a clunk of coffee for our first poll for today, asking everybody in attendance, which group does your business fall under? So now Richard has toggled on the poll. Please take a second to toggle over to the chat and simply respond. See some raised hands in the audience. If you guys had something that you wanted to mention, then please do in the chat bubble. Not a lot of votes with a lot of attendees here, but no worries whatsoever. We see that it's about 50-50. That's my guess for knowing the organizations that are in attendance today. And we're going to have to continue on with today's session. We can, of course, you can circle back to the polls that have already been launched as well to submit your vote. But the chat bubble is where you're going to find these different polls. We will then get back to the content for today. You might be thinking to yourself, well, my HQ isn't in the EU. This isn't really about me, right? Well, don't close down the webinar too quickly. You will always also have to pay attention, even if you're headquartered in a non-EU country. If you simply operate in the EU and generate turnover similar to that in groups 1 and 2, then you may also be affected by the EU due diligence law. If you operate in a small, medium-sized enterprise, then you will not be directly affected by this proposal. However, this new law is part of a trend and things to come, and therefore it's important, of course, to keep an eye on the evolution that's happening within environmental and human rights requirements, even if you operate within an SME or if you have suppliers that are SMEs. As we often talk about at Kodiak Hub, the 4 R's are a theme that we talk about, which are rather central to enhancing corporate responsibility, supply chain due diligence, and ensuring supplier engagement when doing so. And the 4 R's are something that we would love to share with you guys here today. That is rationale, making sure that your suppliers know the importance of the due diligence activity, relevancy, keeping things relevant to the type of suppliers, responsiveness, making sure that you feed back reports and corrective actions to those that participate, and also recognition, not being afraid to give your suppliers a big thumbs up and recognizing them when they're doing a good job. The EU has certainly taken the 4 R's into consideration, especially relevancy and rationality, when this proposed legislation is protecting SMEs from any type of excessive scrutiny or unnecessary requirements. This is including 2 primary areas where they are protecting your SME or your suppliers that are SMEs. The provision of the guidance and other tools will help them gradually integrate sustainability considerations into their business operations. On top of that, it's ensuring that member states shall provide further technical support and may provide financial support to SMEs to facilitate the adoption as well as the adaptation within their organization. As I think that we can all agree at this point, right, after everything that we've presented today, this is becoming the new normal. People do not want to do business with businesses that do not care about people. They want to do business with businesses that care about people, the planet, and the profits how their profit is made, right? The broadened requirements that come with this particular legislation really just solidify the importance of responsible business practices and more specifically supply chain practices as well. This legislation is coming again as no real shocker. If we just look at some of the recently passed legislation, we see that supplier due diligence is a new trend. Lieferkettengesetz, please excuse my German there. In English, the Supply Chain Act is a German law that I'm sure that many in attendance here are familiar with. And this was passed back in 2021 of February, just 1 year prior to the EU due diligence legislative proposal. During Kodiak Hub's webinar on procurement trends for 2022, we mentioned that the German Supply Chain Act was just going to be a drop in the sea of coming legislation that is enforcing a need for increased supply chain transparency and corporate governance. The previous passing of Lieferkettengesetz, the German Supply Chain Act, really just makes the passing of the EU's corporate sustainability due diligence proposal all the more likely during the coming year or years. The German Supply Chain Act, much like the proposed EU Act, really aims to enforce sustainable business practices within the broader value chains of large German organizations. And legal requirements of this act force companies to really just take responsibility for their global supply chains with enhanced due diligence, corporate governance, and to have a means to report upon violations within various criteria, including social, environmental, and financial criteria. The Supply Chain Act itself comes into force at the beginning of 2023. And this is going to affect initially companies with at least 3,000 employees. So, of course, global organizations with complex supply chains are going to be those that are most affected. And from 2024, this is going to affect companies with 1,000 employees or more. The EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Act will definitely be more all-encompassing, I would say, than the Supply Chain Act. If it is passed, it's actually going to impact companies that are just 1/4 the size of those that are impacted in 2024 by the German Supply Chain Act. So if we shift back to the proposed EU legislation, what will happen to you really if you don't comply? Well, if companies fail to comply, then they'll be considered accountable for any adverse impact that results within the activities of their organization, right? This is a broad area of accountability, and it might leave your business open to risks for many different points, especially negative impact on brand and shareholder value. Victims will also be empowered to open suits, claims against companies that fall short of these newly proposed laws. And this liability encompasses a company's own operations as well as those of its subsidiaries, its suppliers, and established relationships. Simply put, and I mean, we're not saying this to scare you, but it's time to hop on board the due diligence train, right? Otherwise, you got to get the heck out of the way, really. Due diligence today should be expected at the start of any collaboration. And really, we believe that this serves as a foundation for supplier management, and it's seen as an iterative process throughout the course of a buyer to supplier relationship. Supplier due diligence, while it might not be super sexy, it is an essential building block for open and innovative buyer to supplier partnerships. And as we see, it's soon the law. So what exactly can you and your team of procurement professionals, supply chain, quality, and sustainability teams do to prepare yourself and to become proactive for the future legislation? Well, Kodiak Hub would like to give you guys some concrete tips and suggesting our 6-step ladder to address corporate sustainability and supply chain due diligence. Starting with step number 1, which might seem very simple, but of course important. Understanding the entirety of the legislation. Make sure that you have competency in-house or bring in external experts that are going to help you to identify where actions need to be taken in your business and how your company will be uniquely impacted. Step 2, align your team. Make sure that your organization is on board and that you'll likely need to work with expanding team competency, shifting culture, and also maybe eliminating unsustainable business practices. Step 3, start flagging and communicating to your supply chain, to your suppliers, the importance of this legislation. It's going to require enhanced reporting, enhanced due diligence, and a proper measurement of social and environmental impact. You need to aim to entice and inspire via the communication that you're having with your suppliers, and also entice them to kind of try and inspire and communicate to further tiers of your supply chain. Step number 4, it's good to adopt tooling for more systematic, more streamlined supplier management and due diligence. Adopting modern solutions will help you to segment suppliers, align on ESG KPIs, to identify risks, to assess suppliers, to measure, to benchmark, and report on social and environmental supply chain due diligence, which is then, of course, going to be a key element for creating material impact fast. Step number 5, you need to engage your supply chain. You, of course, might have previously trusted in them or trusted in their, published accreditation, but you're going to have to re-engage, right? Technology can ease this process, but you got to ensure that you're communicating, assessing, and following up with your suppliers to ensure that you have measurable results and that your suppliers also are having a more engaging user experience as well. Step 6, the last, it's all about culture. It's going to be a management of change and a culture shift. Though the EU legislation has yet to be set in stone or passed, it's really important to start now with shifting your priorities and your buying culture. Sustainable procurement practices will just continue to become the status quo. We see this year by year, and investing in people and culture will be equally as important as the adoption of new technologies to scale due diligence. The embryo to change, though, really is going to start with managing change, managing the culture, and managing and changing your team's mindset. Now we want to get and stop here for the next poll, which I hope is going to technically be working better this time. The Teams platform has just changed their polling capabilities, but we want to launch the next poll, which is asking here, which particular area of the 4 that we're going to now launch here do you see as your biggest hurdle for corporate sustainability due diligence? Please vote here now. You should see in the middle of your screen the launch of the poll. Well, it seems as if the polling application is still not working for some of the users. It might be because you guys have not yet updated your Teams app. As like I said, Teams has actually just updated their polling. So sorry if you're not seeing this on screen. It seems as if there's a mix, though, for those that have been able to respond back. Supply chain engagement is one of the biggest hurdles that they see. Some other people, it's kind of balanced between team and competency, as well as then also buying culture. Not really that much of a surprise. It's very difficult to get your supply chain to engage. But of course, technology can help that. But of course, communication and culture shifts is going to be another big element that's going to help that a lot. To provide some more concrete examples, we're going to get back into the day's content here. And we would love to show how Kodiak Hub has helped clients just like those of you that are in attendance today to become more proactive and also save time on corporate sustainability and supply chain due diligence. We'd like actually to take this opportunity to dive into a recent case study and utilize this as a case study spotlight for our amazing customer HL Display, who has seen massive benefits from adopting our solution, streamlining corporate sustainability due diligence, as well as then enhancing their overall supply chain compliance. For those of you who don't know about HL Display, HL Display is a brand who is helping retailers and brands around the world to create attractive and profitable in-store environments, and also to strengthen the consumer shopping experience. HL Display has production sites in Sweden, Poland, China, and UK, combined with sales units across more than 20 countries. The challenge that HL Display faced was a pretty normal one that you guys might also recognize here yourself. HL Display wanted to save time on supplier due diligence, risk assessment, and overall supply chain compliance. Their group purchasing team had already recognized that supply chain due diligence was going to be a pillar to help them to meet their sustainability goals. They had, however, close to 1,000 suppliers, and much of their supplier data was localized in a distributed ERP landscape, or it was on individuals, computers or in spreadsheets, notes, emails. HL Display was simply just having a hard time leveraging their supplier data in the most efficient way. Information was scattered. The SRM process itself was requiring heavy manual work, which meant that supply chain due diligence took a really long time, sometimes as long as 8 to 10 months to gain any type of clarity and to report, right? So by the time they were ready to report, unfortunately, it was time to start the process all over again. HL Display adopted Kodiak Hub's SRM solution to be able to centralize, onboard, and collect supplier data. We helped to get, of course, HL Display out of their localized notes and spreadsheets into a consolidated platform where their purchasing team gained deeper access and visibility into the more empiric sets of supplier data and information. HL Display really leveraged our solution for self-assessment, for onboarding, but they also utilized it to build customized self-assessment templates, utilizing our drag and drop capabilities, combined with the rating methodology, as well as then also our global library of international and industry best practices, which also made sure that they were meeting legal and industry-specific requirements when it came to their DD activities. The result, well, HL Display went from working 8 to 10 months to create, send out, gather on reports and their information within the supply chain compliance to simply just 3 weeks from start to finish. Though the application of SRM software, through this application, of course, the team also really managed to meet their goals, some of which were tied to sustainability, and one of those being 90% supplier code of conduct compliance. Simply, they were able to take really their due diligence from manual to magnificent, which saved their team a massive amount of time in the process. Beyond the presented case study, we want to hit you with some sound rhetoric and also relay what the EU Commission has defined as some of the greatest benefits. We're not going to run with this next poll, as it seems as if the poll function, unfortunately, is not working for some of you guys in attendance. So we're not getting fair results here, of course. It's a shame, but we will, of course, troubleshoot it afterwards. We wanted to present here with you some of the EU Commission's own definitions of what being proactive towards this EU legislation can be able to deliver when it comes to beefing up on corporate sustainability due diligence. These 7 elements we're going to dig into one by one. Number 1, preventing legal fragmentation. I mean, I'm sure that some of you guys feel this in your organizations. Some EU countries have developed national rules or want to do so, but the scope of these measures varies, a lot from country to country. Again, the application of this legislation will try and cover, make a more aligned legal coverage across the EU and again, across your different entities in the EU. Number two, which is of course incredibly important aspect of this, is meeting consumers' growing demands. I mean, consumers are drawn increasingly to products and brands that are made and functioning in an ethically and environmentally sustainable way. As we see from studies like this one from PwC back in 2021, from a consumer intelligence survey, 83% of global consumer respondents indicated that they believed companies should be shaping ESG best practices. Moving on to number three, meeting investors' growing demands. I mean, investors likewise are looking at ESG aspects as a criteria nowadays, and without mandatory action, investors and consumers, might miss consistent benchmarks to be assured about the value chain standards. So we want to make sure that we're also being attractive from that perspective as well as an organization. Another way that you want to become attractive by being proactive within this legislation, becoming more sustainable within your corporate due diligence, is to become a more attractive employer. Really, it was reported by the exact same survey from PwC that 86% of employees care to work for companies that they care about. That care about the same issues that they do, which means that enhanced work with corporate sustainability due diligence could also help you to attract and retain talent. And who doesn't want that in this work climate? Step number 5 on this list of benefits, reinforcing risk management. Thanks to the new rules, companies will have a clearer view of their operations and supply chain, including higher awareness of their negative impacts, and will be able to detect problems and risks earlier as well. And that's never a bad thing. Number 6, generating economic benefits, right? Research shows that companies which incorporate sustainability factors into their policy, into their modes of operating, will generate higher returns. Seen in a 2020 study from Accenture, it was found actually that companies with higher ratings for ESG performance boasted significantly higher profit margins during the span in which they were actually looking into as well. The last element is, of course, something that's increasingly important in a post-COVID world, and we all saw how this was hitting us. Lacking resilience is not fun. These legislation and the implications of taking action to meet the coming legislation will, of course, hopefully help you to increase your resilience and increase your visibility as well. Better understanding the overall social, environmental, and health aspects within your supply chain, and helping you to, of course, avoid risks if they are there. Again, technology can serve as a means, and it can help to be able to take you guys to new heights within your supply chain and corporate sustainability due diligence, and also to save time while doing so. And we're going to dive into the demonstration of Kodiak Hub in just a moment to show you how our solution can be able to help. But we want to remind you that technology is just one piece of the puzzle, all right? People and culture will play a pivotal role in implementing proper actions that are being set out within the EU corporate sustainability due diligence legislation proposal. And in the spirit of not just talking about it, but also then being about it, we are going to get into a demonstration of Kodiak Hub, but we are going to try and launch one last poll before we do so. If we're able to try and launch the last poll, which is, if you guys are interested, would you like a deeper demo of Kodiak Hub sometimes after this meeting? You are also going to receive one now. It's going to be a very brief 5-minute overview of the solution. If you're able to see the poll here, then feel free to respond yes or no. You can also just write in the chat bubble yes, and we will make sure to contact you following this session. If you're not seeing the poll, please feel free to write in the chat bubble now yes, or yes, I'd like a demo, and we'll be able to get in touch with you afterwards for a deeper demonstration as well. Feel free to pop in there and vote, or write in the chat bubble now if you would like a deeper demonstration. And I'm going to simply just shift over my screen here. If you give me one moment, while you're either voting or writing in the chat bubble that you would like a demonstration. I see now that I was chatting there with mute on. We'll try that again. So welcome into the Kodiak Hub solution. We're going to give a brief demonstration, just a few minutes, to be able to show the entirety of the solution as far as some interfaces, but we're not going to be able to get super duper deep. Again, if you guys want a demonstration that's a deeper demonstration, just write so in the chat bubble if you're not seeing the poll, and we'll make sure to reach out to you for a time that you can book in our calendar. But we're going to try and brief over as much as possible to also show how our solution can help you guys to be able to meet particular requirements within supply chain due diligence. At a glance, we're able to see our suppliers around the globe here. Indicated to us is also then a macro risk rating driven by third-party intelligence. And you're going to also be able to spot individual suppliers and their overall rating profiles here. The rating profile is driven by KPIs. A 360-degree rating really is the focus of what we're helping our customers to build. Everything from risk aspects to compliance aspects to performance aspects are then taken into consideration within the rating profile. There are global filters around the solution to help our customers quickly identify and find solutions in particular groupings, whatever those might be, to segment tagged suppliers and be able to very quickly initiate different types of actions or manage those suppliers. There's other ways, of course, to be able to view supplier data. One of those very simple ways is in a supplier list overview, where you not only can be able to find different suppliers and very quickly to filter those suppliers based upon various types of data properties. So say, for example, we want to be able to only filter out all of the red risk suppliers, so to say, or the suppliers that have been flagged. Well, then we can be able to quickly do so by applying that particular filter. What we can also then do is be able to choose from a preset of different lists to be able to find different supplier groupings as well there. As we would like to, we can also then quickly search for single suppliers and find those individual suppliers. We can jump also into their individual supplier scorecards. I will proceed without the changes that I've made here. And these individual scorecards are really a robust and 360-degree view that gives us an overview of supplier data, information, documentation, as well as then insights and communication with the supplier. We could be able to better understand how the supplier is uniquely operating within the sustainability and governance rating, for example. Within this particular context, it's important to show off. This rating profile is driven then by response values and engagement from the supplier themselves, which is helping us to gauge various KPIs that might be important to us, whether that's gathering back documentation or different response values in different areas, so that we can, of course, follow up on the supplier's overall level of supply chain compliance. This is then helping us to not have to dig into individual responses, but rather giving us an opportunity to be able to quickly see risks and opportunities, but also to be able to track progression over time. Is the supplier getting better or are they getting worse? There's softer elements to the relationship management, like note-taking in the solution. There's an action portal where we can be able to issue different types of communication back and forth to the supplier. And we can also then have all of those ongoing or archived communications directly here. We can start new communications, but also to jump into the collaboration or communication portal back and forth between us and the supplier here. So we can also drive corrective actions directly within the solution, pinging the supplier via their email to be able to respond back. Everyone everyone can be able to share documents in the same way that we can be able to share communication back and forth. Keeping documentation on file, keeping it typified, keeping it marked with expiry dates as well. And of course, any documentation shared with us, whether it's in the action portal or in any type of templates that we ask the supplier, will also be able to be quickly found here. So whether that's anything from compliance documentation related to, social aspects, or things that might be more, pertinent to our business, for example, or the type of supplier that this is, those documentations, certifications, contracts, product specifications, they can all be found here. They can be quickly downloaded. They can be uploaded by you as the user. You have the capabilities to do so. But the most important thing here is that you're also able to see when things were uploaded, as well as then get expiry date notifications as well on the supplier's overall capabilities and when the documents are running out. Other things that exist are third-party insights, as you see, the financials on the right-hand side, media, sanctions and blacklists, as well as then other insights related to the supplier's performance, as well as to the overall country risk of this particular supplier. We unfortunately don't have too much time to get into that. The one thing I wanted to show off was the capabilities for assessment. Very, very sleek template builder we have. You could be able to very quickly draft templates that also are in line with different types of requirements that might be important. For example, you could build up individual templates that are named and specific to particular types of activities, such as the EU due diligence laws that are coming. You can be able to also then choose what are in fact the rating areas that we want to ask different question sets. We can do a data check where we can ask the suppliers themselves for different data properties. Maybe there are things that are not really related to exactly the supplier's overall, kind of business practices, but more so just kind of data that we want them to be able to keep up to date. Well, then we can simply drag in or drag out those things out of context, and we can be able to then have the supplier update this data themselves. If they have data on file, then they'll be able to update it. If they don't have data, then they'll be able to provide us with the new data. Underneath the content section, we're able to build up our assessment templates as we would like to, so that we can start reporting back accordingly. We can be able to build out headers. We can be able to build out different types of individual sections where we can ask the questions in subsections as we would like to. We can also then quickly drag in or drag out different types of questions. So very quickly, we can be able to say, okay, I want to ask a different question about a different topic. Well, then I can be able to do so. Each of these individual things are driven by an attribute library. And as you see, the attributes themselves can be quickly searched for on the right-hand side to be able to find those attributes within the library. And these are then taken from our global library that has over 4,000 best practices, where you can be able to locate them directly that are activated locally on your account in that case as well. So you're not having to search through all 4,000, but you're searching through the ones that are relevant for you. You can also be able to create, of course, different types of attributes that are unique to your business, but this is helping our customers to stay on top of legal as well as then industry specific requirements. Then you're ready to build some messaging as well on top of that. You can be able to brand your outreach to suppliers to make sure that they know and make it look and feel like it's coming to them. Put in placeholders, of course, so that they say, wow, this customer really cares about me, when in reality, you could be sending this out to all your suppliers at once, and you give them directly a button or a link to enter in. No login needed, which means that there's no supplier losing their password or no confusing interface when they enter in. They get an email with a sleek and easy to use interface, which you, of course, can be able to preview at any point in time to see the supplier experience, which, of course, is very simple. It's a form where they're going to be able to respond back. When documentation is required, they're going to be able to quickly see what documentation is provided or required of them. They're going to be able to also then respond back in each section accordingly. This is an online and live link, so they can be able to share it amongst their team. There's going to be a status of how much they've completed along the way, and they can be able to work through this assessment, responding then to all the questions that you've set out for them to be able to respond to. And once they have then completed the assessment, they'll be able to submit as well with the responses if they have then completed the activity that you've set out for them. What are you able to start seeing? Well, you see results in scorecards, but you can also be able to see quick overviews to see which suppliers have been flagged. You could also be able to dive in very quickly to those suppliers that you would like to see their quick view results. Or you can be able to dive into individual and deep dive reports about each of these individual suppliers to be able to see why is it that this particular supplier has been flagged. Well, we can be able to quickly identify that particular subsection and which particular KPI it is that this supplier has not met compliance. And this is the same thing for being able to meet legal requirements as well. We could be able to pull forward these different types of insights, not only in the scorecard, but also in broader analysis within the intelligence section for reporting and alike as well. That was what I wanted to be able to demonstrate within the solution today. And I appreciate everyone that's hanging on here to be able to get a view of the solution today. Again, if you haven't done so already, if you haven't been able to answer on the poll, but you would like a demonstration, just don't be shy. Feel free to write in the chat bubble right now, and we'll make sure to reach out to you after this session. If you guys have now any questions, then we're going to move into the last section, which I'm going to pause here a moment or two to be able to allow all of the attendees in the session to ask questions here.